All right, well, happy Friday. This is a new little project I've been thinking about over these past couple of weeks, and so here we go. This is going to be the My Upgrade Offer podcast, episode one, and this is being recorded Friday, September 22nd, 2023, and we're going to call this one Delta, 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 because Mother Delta here in Atlanta is all over the news, all over my social media, in sliding in my DMs, all over the place. So let's go ahead and get down to why we're talking about it. So news. So the first little segment that we'll try to do in a little cadence, weekly, bi-weekly, is a news segment, and for Delta is going to be, I'm calling it Delta hires Tom Brady to help cull the medallions. So let's break this down a little bit and do a little bit of a history lesson. And so if you go back to, let's say, the 70s and 80s of, let's call it business travel here in the United States, this also, I guess, now that I think about it, during the 80s, during deregulation, actually, let's go back a little bit further than that. Before deregulation here in the United States, you had, let's say, Atlanta, Los Angeles. Our government would actually regulate that route. The airlines actually kind of all had to go to our government to a big bureaucratic process and said, I can fly that route. Here's how I plan to fly it, the days of the weeks, the equipment, the planes I'm going to fly on that route. Maybe I'm going to stop over somewhere to get to California. And here's the fare that I'm going to charge for coach, first class. And there were probably maybe 3 or 4 fares. It was a whole lot simpler than what you have today. Well, the powers that be, cough, cough, Republicans, in the 80s, well, I won't quite blame it on that. I'll take that back. Okay, the powers that be in the 70s decided to deregulate the airline business. And suddenly, the government was not involved in all this. And this capitalistic country that we live in, capitalism meaning, profit, sometimes at any cost, you no longer had that, bureaucratic overreach in the airline business here in the US. And brand new airlines were welcome to start up and compete with the airlines that had been around for decades. What this ended up happening to, the airlines there were, bankruptcies. Yeah. TWA went away, Pan Am went away. Delta ended up gobbling up Pan Am. American gobbled up TWA. You had mergers. Remember, US Air is now American. It's the reason Charlotte is the American hub. This is all history, right? So the reason I'm sharing this is, going back to the 80s when the airlines had to start competing against each other, you had these frequent flyer programs that became, beasts in themselves. And, at Delta, it was the medallion program. Over at United, it's, my apologies, American was Advantage, and so forth. And, and I'm going to get to this point in a minute, but it boils down to, what do you prioritize when you go to book your next flight? And, I'm going to create some buckets. I'm going to assume that a lot of you folks that are listening to this, you're probably booking your next flight for a vacation. And so you have that mindset, right? But honestly, the airlines, they want you to book, that flight with them. But honestly, you're not their target customer. And I'm not saying that as a mean thing. It's just if you boil it down, you're not really their target customer. I'm sorry. They want to go after the business travelers. They want to go after the travelers that are booking first class. That's where they make their most money. Okay. And so, back in the 80s and 90s, they started these frequent flyer programs, right? The whole term, if you've heard of business class was created and then forged in a lot of business travel reimbursement programs, that if you were going to travel international from the US to another country, you are permitted to book a business class. And and not first class, because that's a little bit too much nicer, but it comes out of that whole time back in the 80s and 90s where it was acceptable. It was in the corporate policy. Just another example there, right? So, all these years, traditionally, these frequent flyer status levels were based on flying, mostly. Well, over the years, then came along these credit cards. Now, it shouldn't be any shock that when you go and use a credit card at the restaurant, at the supermarket, wherever, a percentage of that is cut and passed through the banks and so forth. I have not found it written, but someone tells me that every time you swipe a Delta branded American Express card, Delta Airlines gets 4% of that transaction. If you were to do the math, just think of the extra income. Now, in total, you can see it because Delta is a public company. You can see their stock reports, you can see their income, everything. The numbers are there, and you actually see where they bank that income every year, every month, every day, coming in from American Express. And so a number of years ago, they got, of course, this partnership. Every time you fly through Atlanta, you've got these folks, like glorified used car salesmen, selling a American Express Delta branded credit card with some annual fee, with some sort of perk. Are you going to get Sky Miles? Are you going to get MQMs? All this kind of stuff. And so someone has coined this, and I'm going to quote it because I just saw it in a thread before I just started this. AMEX and Delta created a three-headed monster. That's not too correct there, right? So what this has created is, remember, we just talked about, it started out with these frequent flyer programs. The more you fly, the more perks you get. So you get to, book another trip for free, and then these other trips you get upgrades and these other little perks. You get to board earlier. You get to call customer service and jump the line, and all these other little perks there. Well, now, over the last number of years, it's not necessarily that you fly as much. And of course, if any of you are following this, what Delta has done is they've taken this even further and moved the goalpost even further out. So starting with the qualification year for medallion status, now this is not going to go into effect. Again, I'm recording this September 2023. This is not going to start until January 1st, 2024, because you start qualifying normally for this status, January 1st. But Delta only cares about how much money you spend. If you only buy a $100 plane ticket, that is not going to meet as much status as that $4,000 round trip, premium select seat or what have you. Also, all of these charges, interestingly, on the American Express card, you can still get some what they're calling MQDs, medallion qualifying dollars, but all of a sudden, for every $10, and in some cases for every $20 you spend and swipe that MX card, that then translates into 1 MQD. And going forward, that's all Delta is going to care about. They're going to show me the money to get that status. And Lord have mercy, you would have thought folks are losing their minds, heads exploding everywhere. I don't. It has to stop somewhere. So this is from someone who has followed the industry for quite some time. Earlier this year, a lot of you know that I actually worked for a major airline for a number of months. Saw it from the inside out. I'm currently a medallion member, but freaking out about it, I feel like it is okay. Have fun, go freak out, whatever. I'm gonna go fly somebody else. But again, living in Atlanta, good luck. We tried last Christmas. We flew Southwest here in Atlanta. The baggage check line was almost a 45-minute wait. The lady behind us, I'm quoting her. She says, "If you ain't flying Delta in Atlanta, this airport don't care about you." And the love it or hate it, it's none of that's going to change within the next few months or a year. The Delta pretty much has a fortress hub here, and if you live here, you're going to know who Delta is, and the ins and outs and pros and cons there. I don't really have another choice, honestly. I mean, yes, I could book another airline, but there are some other pros and cons. So I would ask you, and I'm going to invite feedback. I would like open discussion about this. When you go to book a ticket, what do you prioritize? These behemoth large airlines, they cannot be everything to everyone. It's impossible. I had a former coworker that said it best. Trying to be, and check every box for every single customer, that is going to be a recipe for disaster. The airlines know that they cannot please everyone, that they are not going to be able to literally check every single box. There has to be an appreciation for how many people that it takes just to get you into that seat, and how many more people it takes to lift that plane off the ground and deliver you to your destination, and then how many more people to get you and your bags off that plane. People don't realize that. I mean, even with all the automation out there, the technology and everything, at the end of the day, there are still some jobs in this business that cannot be automated. Someone has to crawl through that plane and put your bag on that plane. And those people do not work for free. They, honestly, I think you will be surprised how much some of those people do make to do some of those jobs. And so, again, I would ask you, again, honestly, respond. What do you prioritize? Is it getting there on time? Is it having entertainment in flight? Is it having Wi-Fi in flight? Is it having a consistent experience on board with service? I heard someone complain recently, I flew first class on Delta, no one offered to get my coat and hang it up, just as an example. Is that, though, in the priority, had you rather get to your destination on time versus someone hanging up your coat? And I want to say as well, I'm not trying to justify anything that any shortcomings. I have, fully, experienced many service issues, and, voice my concerns and so forth. But at the end of the day, no airline is perfect. Even, I guarantee you, even if you went out and hired a private jet with a private pilot, your expectations would probably still not be what you thought for writing that check or swiping that card for that type of experience. So I'm going to pause here just to, before we move on, and make sure that all the technology is working before we move on to the next segment.